Life in the Midwest during the 1960s carried a charm that's hard to put into words. Days were simpler, yet filled with quirky little details that made everyday life memorable. From small-town traditions to childhood pastimes, the ordinary felt special in ways we hardly notice today. These are the kinds of things that made growing up in that era unique, moments now half forgotten, but treasured when remembered. Ah, kids, you know. Back when I was your age, our phone numbers weren't just numbers. We used words at the start, like ours began with Cedar 5. It made it feel special, almost like each family belonged to a little club. Saying Cedar 5 out loud gave it a cozy hometown ring that numbers today just don't have. We also had these little booklets we filled with trading stamps, S&H green stamps mostly. Every time we bought groceries, the cashier would hand them out, and at home we'd paste them in carefully. When the booklet was full, we'd trade them in for household treasures. It felt like magic, turning everyday shopping into a little reward. Car trips were different too. No seat belts or fancy car seats. Us kids would stretch out in the back window shelf, up near the glass. It was warm from the sun, and we'd watch the sky change as we drove. Looking back, I can't believe our parents thought that was safe. But to us, it was an adventure. Oh, and Christmas, now that was a sight. Some families had these shiny aluminum trees. They didn't need ornaments much, just a rotating color wheel shining red, blue, green, and gold across the branches. The whole room would shimmer like something out of the future, though it was still just our little living rooms. For fun, we had magic slates. They were these plastic boards where you'd draw with a little stylus, then peel back the sheet to erase it. Over and over, we'd doodle and scribble, laughing at the silly things we made vanish with a swipe. It was our version of endless paper. Even the way we opened things was different. Soda and soup cans didn't have pull tabs. You had to use a triangular church key opener. You'd punch 2 holes in the top, one for pouring and the other to let the air in. Funny how something so ordinary felt like a little ritual. Sometimes, instead of S&H, stores gave out blue chip or gold bond stamps. We'd help paste those too, licking the backs until our tongues felt dry. Filling a booklet was a family project, and the reward was always something practical, like a toaster or a lamp. But oh, the excitement of trading them in. At noon, every day, the town siren would blow. It wasn't for an emergency, it was just a signal, almost like the town's heartbeat. You could set your watch by it. We kids would pause our games, look up, and then go right back to playing, comforted by that steady routine. And the girls, well, they had their tricks for beauty. If they wanted straight hair, they didn't have flat irons. They'd lay their hair right on the ironing board, and a sister or friend would smooth it out with the household iron. The smell of hot hair in the air was something unforgettable. The men, especially the office fellows, always had these pocket protectors filled with pens. It made them look so serious, like they were ready for any calculation or signature at a moment's notice. To us kids, it was a badge of importance, a symbol that they worked in a world of ideas. When we got new shoes, sometimes the stores had these machines, fluoroscopes they called them. You'd stick your feet in, and you could see the bones right through your shoes on a screen. We thought it was incredible, almost like magic. No one worried back then about whether it was safe. I remember the boys carrying draft cards in their wallets. You had to, once you turned 18. It was a quiet reminder that grown-up life wasn't all fun and games. For many, it meant thinking about Vietnam. There was a weight to it, even if you were just starting out in life. Meals changed, too. Sometimes, when Mom was tired, we'd have TV dinners. They came in foil trays, divided into neat little sections: meatloaf, mashed potatoes, maybe some corn. You'd pop them in the oven, and the whole family would eat on trays in front of the television. It felt modern, almost glamorous. Cars were different as well. Built into the doors were ashtrays and little cigarette lighters. Everyone smoked back then. Parents, neighbors, teachers even. We didn't think twice about the smell or the smoke swirling in the car. It was just how things were. On hot days, Mom would make us Kool-Aid popsicles. She'd pour the sweet drink into ice cube trays, stick in toothpicks, and freeze them. We'd run outside, dripping red or purple down our chins, so happy for that little homemade treat. It didn't cost much, but it felt like pure joy. Nothing in the kitchen went to waste either. Bacon grease was saved in coffee tins, set right on the stove. It was used to fry eggs or flavor beans. That smell, smoky and rich, always filled the kitchen. A reminder that every bit of food had value. In school, we'd get the weekly reader. Oh, how exciting it was to unfold those thin pages, filled with stories about space travel or kids in far-off places. It made the world feel bigger, yet somehow closer, too. For many of us, it was the first window into something beyond the Midwest. When the television stopped working, you didn't call a repairman right away. You'd take the tubes out, carry them down to the hardware store, and stick them in the tube tester. If one was bad, you'd buy a new one right there. Fixing things yourself was just the way it was done, and in dime stores, right at the counter, they'd sometimes sell live pets, tiny turtles or even chameleons. We'd beg our parents for one, dreaming of bringing home such exotic creatures. Most didn't live long, but for a short while, they were our prized companions. And of course, little green army men were everywhere. We'd set them up in the sandbox, whole battles laid out in careful rows. Hours would disappear as we created stories. Oh, I can still picture those giant console televisions we had. They weren't just TVs. They were pieces of furniture. Heavy wooden cabinets polished to a shine, with the set tucked inside like a treasure. Families would gather around them, proud as could be, as if owning one meant you'd arrived. At night, your grandma and all the neighborhood ladies would set their hair in pink sponge rollers. I remember the funny side of us kids saying goodnight to moms with heads full of curlers. In the morning, they'd take them out, revealing perfectly set waves that smelled faintly of hairspray. When remote controls first came around, we called them clickers, and they actually clicked loudly. One button for channel up, one for channel down, and maybe a power switch. We thought it was the height of convenience, though most of the time someone still had to fiddle with the antenna. At the corner store, we kids could buy candy cigarettes. We'd puff on them dramatically, pretending to be grown-ups. They were just chalky sugar sticks, but they made us feel daring and mischievous, even as our parents chuckled and shook their heads. Some kids even wrote fan letters to local TV hosts, not Hollywood stars, just the weatherman or the host of the children's program. And would you believe it? Sometimes they wrote back with a signed photo that felt like the most important treasure in the world. Then there were fizzies, little chalky tablets we dropped in water to make soda. They fizzed and bubbled like magic, turning plain water into a treat. The taste wasn't as good as Coca-Cola, but we didn't care. It felt like we were mixing potions in the kitchen. Every kitchen drawer seemed to have a metal ice pick. It wasn't for crafts or odd jobs. It was because freezers made huge blocks of ice, and you had to chip away at them. I can still hear the sound of metal striking ice, sharp and echoing through the house. Boys often carried rabbit's feet on keychains. We believed they brought good luck, even though they were a little gruesome if you think about it now. Mine was bright green, dyed fur with a little gold clasp. I rubbed it smooth, carrying it in my pocket. Town carnivals were a yearly joy, with cakewalks that made your heart race. You'd walk in a circle to music, hoping your number was called. If it was, you won a homemade cake. Some families went home with 2 or 3 stacked high, wrapped in wax paper. In Sunday school, teachers often used flannel graph boards. They'd stick paper cutouts of Bible figures onto fuzzy fabric, and somehow the pictures stayed in place. Watching a whole story unfold on that board was almost as magical as a movie to us. Every night, local TV stations would sign off with the national anthem. The screen would show the flag waving, the music would play, and then static. That was the end of television for the day. Imagine that, TV just stopping. Gas stations made fill-ups special too. They'd hand out glassware, tumblers, coffee mugs, even entire sets, just for buying gas. Families would collect them piece by piece until they had a whole matching set sitting proudly in the kitchen cupboard. Sometimes, when someone famous came through, small towns would hold key to the city ceremonies. They'd give a giant, shiny key, symbolic of trust and honor. To us, it made our little town feel connected to something much bigger. Children's shoes sometimes had squeakers in the heels. You could hear toddlers squeak, squeak, squeak across the floor as they learned to walk. Parents said it was to keep track of them, but for us older kids, it was just hilarious to hear. In school, we had paste in little glass jars with tiny wooden sticks. The smell was unforgettable, sweet, and strange. Everyone knew a kid or two who would sneak a taste, and we'd laugh and wrinkle our noses at the sight. Pedal cars were a dream toy, mini fire engines or shiny convertibles. You'd sit inside and pedal with your feet, rolling proudly down the sidewalk. For a child, it felt like real driving, complete with honking at friends. Playgrounds were wilder then. We had big metal merry-go-rounds, and kids would spin them as fast as possible until someone tumbled off into the dirt. Bruises and scraped knees were badges of honor, proof of a good day. Schoolyards were surrounded by chain-link fences, and many had those tall metal climbing domes. We'd scramble to the top, hanging upside down like monkeys, with no one worrying about safety mats, just grass and the occasional sprained ankle. For a short while, paper dresses were a fad. They were printed in bright patterns, worn once or twice, and tore easily. Imagine a dress made of decorated paper. What a strange idea! But at the time it seemed modern and fun, and every small-town newspaper had a society column. It listed who had relatives visiting, who went on vacation, even who hosted dinner parties. It felt like everyone's lives were woven together because you could open the paper and see yourself or your neighbors in print. I can still see the grocery clerks with their hand-crank adding machines pulling the lever down with a loud ka-chunk after every row of numbers. The sound filled the store like music, and watching the tape roll out was almost as satisfying as carrying home a bag of penny candy. In school, penmanship contests were a big deal. We all lined up our loops and curls, hoping for that shiny gold star. Teachers took pride in our handwriting, and winning meant your name went up on the board, a tiny bit of fame that lasted all week. Speaking of candy, you could walk to the corner store and buy a sweet for just a penny. Rows of glass jars lined the counter, and the shopkeeper would scoop out your choice with a little metal shovel. With a dime in your pocket, you felt rich. And oh, those thick Christmas catalogs from Montgomery Ward and Sears. We called them wish books, and we'd dog-ear the pages, circling toys, clothes, even furniture. Hours were spent dreaming, even if we knew Santa wasn't bringing half of what we marked. We also collected glass soda bottles for deposit refunds. A nickel or dime back might not sound like much, but it added up. We'd haul them to the store in squeaky wagons, and the money we got back usually went straight into candy or baseball cards. Mothers back then didn't worry much about strollers. They'd park big wicker baby buggies outside the store, babies bundled up under the shade of a bonnet, while they shopped inside. Nobody thought twice about it. It was just how things were. At school, milk came with cardboard caps, and we saved them for fundraisers. Whole classrooms worked together, filling jars until they overflowed. It felt like we were part of something bigger, doing our bit with every sip at lunch. Bikes were our freedom, and the coolest ones had tall sissy bars and banana seats. You felt like you were riding a motorcycle, leaning back with the wind in your hair. We decorated the spokes with cards too, just to make them roar. Hitchhiking was nothing unusual then. A thumb stuck out on the roadside, and some neighbor, or even a stranger, would pull over. It was seen as practical, not dangerous, and many a young man made it to work or a dance that way. Around New Year's, the local banks would hand out calendars and wooden rulers. Families counted on them, one calendar in the kitchen, one in Dad's workshop. It was a little tradition, a way of saying the bank was part of the family's year ahead. At home, bills and receipts were tucked neatly into accordion folders. They expanded and bulged as the months went by, stuffed with papers. I remember the feel of the worn edges, knowing inside was the story of our family's whole year. And toys. Those metal Tonka trucks could survive anything. Built like tanks, they were so heavy they could dent the floor if you dropped one. We dug trenches with them in the backyard, hauling dirt until our clothes were filthy and our mothers called us in. Sundays had their own rhythm. Moms would starch and iron sheets, smoothing every crease until they were crisp. Crawling into bed that night, the cool, stiff fabric smelled of soap and warmth. A reminder of care that only mothers gave. Girls tamed their flyaway hair with hair tonic. The bottles sat on every dresser, and you could always smell its sharp, clean scent. It promised smoothness, though sometimes it left hair stiff as cardboard. Still, it was better than the wild frizz without it. Before the 4th of July, boys could buy bottle rockets right at the corner shop. We'd sneak them home, lighting fuses with matches, laughing as they shot into the air. Sometimes they tipped sideways. Dangerous, yes, but to us it was pure fun. Public swimming pools were strict in those days. Before you could even touch the water, you had to line up for a shower. The lifeguards made sure of it. We'd shiver under the spray, impatient to cannonball into the pool. But rules were rules. People collected matchbooks everywhere they went, restaurants, motels, even gas stations. The covers piled up in kitchen drawers, little souvenirs of everyday life. Some were colorful, some plain, but each one carried a memory of a meal or a trip. When you stopped for gas, you didn't just get fuel. The attendant handed you free maps, crisp and brightly colored, showing every highway and back road. Families kept stacks in the glove box, unfolding them on vacations like a treasure hunt. Every TV seemed to have a ceramic poodle perched on top. Sometimes black, sometimes white, they looked regal and a little silly. They weren't just decorations. They were conversation pieces, something to dust carefully every Saturday. And oh, the sound of an electric percolator in the morning. That bubbling gurgle filled the kitchen, followed by the rich aroma of coffee drifting through the house. It was the smell of mornings, of waking slowly while the day came to life. I remember when we carried little autograph books to fairs and parades. We'd run up to the local band leader, the mayor, or even a baton twirler, asking for their signature. The pages filled with names and doodles, and to us it felt like collecting pieces of history. On the sidewalks downtown, men worked at shoe shine stands. They'd snap their rags with flair, buffing leather until it gleamed. Businessmen sat tall in those chairs, proud of their polished shoes, while we kids watched, fascinated by the rhythm of it all. High school socials were formal affairs, with dance cards tied to the girls' wrists. Boys would line up to sign for a waltz or a jitterbug, and the card filled up quickly. It was sweet and awkward, but it gave everyone a chance to dance. Drugstores had soda fountains run by soda jerks. They mixed cherry or vanilla into Coca-Cola with a long spoon, making fizzy magic in a glass. Sitting on a swivel stool, sipping through a paper straw, you felt like the world was bright and endless. Homemade macrame plant hangers dangled in kitchens, holding spider plants or ivy. Mothers tied the knots themselves, proud of their handiwork. The ropes sometimes frayed, but the plants thrived, swinging gently when someone passed by. And penny loafers, kids actually tucked pennies into them. We thought it was stylish, and the coins clinked when we walked. Some said it was for good luck, others just liked the look, but it was a little detail that made the shoes our own. Summers meant dragging out those metal lawn chairs, the ones with webbing that pinched your legs and frames that baked in the sun. Sitting on one in shorts was like sitting on a griddle, but no backyard gathering was complete without them. When the floors were freshly waxed, we kids couldn't resist sliding across in socks. We'd run, leap, and glide, crashing into furniture with laughter. Mothers scolded us for leaving streaks, but the thrill of sliding was worth every warning. Teachers often kept yardsticks at the ready. Sometimes they tapped them on desks to get our attention. Sometimes they swatted them against the chalkboard. Just the sound was enough to make a classroom fall silent in a heartbeat. Families piled into station wagons for road trips, no seatbelts in sight. We sprawled on the floor, stretched out on seats, even sat facing backward in the way back. The ride itself was half the fun, filled with snacks, games, and endless "Are we there yet?" Some men still carried pocket watches long after wristwatches were the norm. They'd pull them out with a little flourish, flipping open the lid to check the time. It gave them a dignity, a link to a more careful, measured way of living. Teenagers often worked detasseling corn in the summers. Hot, sticky days in the fields, pulling tassels by hand, sweat dripping down your back. It was hard work, but it paid, and you felt grown up, earning your own money under the big Midwest sky. School assemblies sometimes showed black and white safety films. Grainy movies warned us about crossing streets, playing with matches, or talking to strangers. They were serious and a little scary, but they stuck in our minds, shaping how we saw the world. When winter came, Mom saved bread bags to use as boot liners. We slipped them over our socks before putting on boots, and they kept our feet dry, even if they crinkled with every step. It was simple, practical, and it worked. Baseball cards weren't just for collecting. We taped them to our bicycle spokes so they clicked and clattered like a motor. Riding down the street, we imagined ourselves on roaring motorcycles, proud of the sound we'd created. Summer movie theaters sprayed bug spray before showings. The smell lingered in the air as we watched cartoons and westerns. We didn't mind. It kept the mosquitoes away, and nothing could ruin the magic of those darkened afternoons. Push lawnmowers had no engines, just blades spinning as you pushed. The clatter of metal against grass was steady and slow, and the smell of fresh clippings followed you. It took time, but it was quiet, almost peaceful work. Electric fans had heavy metal blades, spinning dangerously fast with barely a guard in front. We'd stick our faces close, shouting into them to make our voices sound funny, while mothers hollered for us to step back before we lost a finger. Piggy banks came in all shapes: globes, pigs, even cartoon characters. We fed them nickels and dimes, rattling them proudly, imagining the fortune inside. Breaking one open was a mix of excitement and heartbreak, knowing the magic container couldn't be put back together. And oh, the soapbox derby races. Kids built cars from wood scraps, hammering wheels on and painting them with shaky hands. Racing down the street, wind in your face, was pure joy. Winning wasn't everything. The fun was in building something that flew. I can almost see it. Women pulling out little rain bonnets folded neatly in plastic pouches. They were tucked in purses like treasures, snapped open at the first sign of drizzle, and tied snug under the chin. Practical, unfussy, but unmistakably of the time. Men shined their shoes every Sunday before church. The smell of polish filled the room, and the careful rhythm of the brush gave the act a kind of reverence. By the time families stepped out the door, shoes gleamed like mirrors. Tupperware parties were more than sales pitches. They were competitions. People actually had burping contests, pressing lids down until they gave that satisfying pop. It was silly, but it made the whole room laugh, and everyone left with new containers. Mornings meant Captain Kangaroo on TV, right before school. The gentle voice, the jingling keys, and Mr. Green Jeans felt like family. Kids ate cereal cross-legged in front of the set, soaking in the calm before the school bell. Erector sets came with real, sharp metal parts. Fingers often ended up scratched or pinched, but the pride of building a crane or bridge with your own hands was worth it. Those sets weren't toys. They were blueprints for imagination. In small-town diners, pie cases slowly revolved, glass domes showing off lemon meringue, cherry, and pecan. Choosing a slice was almost ceremonial, and nothing beat the waitress setting it down with a steaming cup of coffee. Public libraries stamped checkout cards by hand. The sound of the date stamp, solid final, meant you'd officially taken a piece of knowledge home. Those cards told the story of every borrower before you, a quiet record of community. Children crowded around metal school water fountains, waiting their turn for a sip. The water always tasted faintly metallic and icy cold, but nothing was better after recess. We'd splash our faces too before dashing back into class. Grocery sacks made of thick brown paper found second lives as book covers. Kids wrapped school books with them, sometimes doodling designs or scrawling their names across the front. It was recycling before we even knew the word. Afternoon matinees cost a quarter, and theaters buzzed with kids clutching candy and popcorn. Double features and cartoons stretched the day, and stepping back into the sunlight afterward always felt like waking from a dream. Movie theaters often had smoking balconies. A haze of smoke drifting as the film played. The smell of tobacco mixed with popcorn was so normal, no one thought twice about it. Store-bought bread was sliced thinner than homemade loaves, soft and uniform, almost too perfect. It was a novelty then, even if mothers still insisted homemade bread filled you better. Candy counters in department stores sold chocolates by weight. A clerk lifted the glass lid, scooped a few pieces into a paper bag, and weighed them on a little scale. It felt like luxury, even when you only bought a handful. School desks still had round inkwell holes drilled into the wood, even though no one used them anymore. They were little reminders of another era, perfect for dropping in erasers or rolling marbles during dull lessons. Roller skates with metal wheels clamped onto shoes, tightened by a special key. The rattle of those wheels on sidewalks was sharp and loud, and skaters often came home with scraped knees, but they felt unstoppable. Baseball cards clicked in bike spokes, transforming every ride into the roar of a motorcycle. The cards bent and frayed, but we didn't care. The sound was worth more than the cards themselves. Classrooms almost always had portraits of Washington and Lincoln. They stared down from the walls, solemn and steady, like silent guardians of every spelling test and arithmetic drill. At small-town banks, ledgers were handwritten in neat, looping script. Tellers flipped through pages carefully, adding figures with precision. Numbers weren't just entries, they were trust, recorded by hand. Water towers in towns were painted with mascots or slogans, Home of the Bulldogs or Pride of Smithville. They loomed above the landscape, a point of identity everyone could see for miles. And when a family got a new color TV, the whole neighborhood crowded in to see it. People gasped at the bright reds and greens, marveling at shows they'd only ever seen in black and white. It wasn't just television, it was a community event.